So my last video on Naughty Dog focuses on the company's over-reliance on the team who made The Last of Us, putting them on the spotlight of the company and making them to keep churning on cinematic games in the same way Telltale games turn out narrative-driven games, and we all know how it worked out with Telltale. While of course Naughty Dog didn't release the games at the same frequency as Telltale, they do give the same amount of strenuous work to its employees, some of which have been hospitalized and one of which was almost silenced and threatened to not get compensated. In that video, I also said that this is the most likely reason why the leaks happened in the first place. A disgruntled employee from Naughty Dog snatched a couple of the early builds that they saved and leaked a lot of the major plot points of the game through the internet at the hopes of fighting against the power. Some people consider this figure as a hero, some people consider this figure as a villain. Whatever your thoughts on that figure is, there's one tiny little problem. According to Sony and Naughty Dog themselves, the person who did this is not affiliated with either Sony or Naughty Dog. I was initially skeptical of the story, thanks to them also saying that an investigation is still ongoing, which basically means that they're not 100% certain of it, but there are definitely more information that come from there. Jason Schreier, the person who wrote the article about Naughty Dog's crunch, and the person who got inside information within Naughty Dog, has also confirmed that. And yes, I wouldn't trust Jason as much as the amount of people that he blocked left and right, but there are instances where he did good journalistic work, and considering that he's the person who wrote the Naughty Dog article, I do not dismiss the possibility that a broken clock can be right twice a day. Now, if you doubt Jason's info, there are several other people who posted their take on the situation, including one who revealed about the vulnerability inside Naughty Dog, which was apparently has been discovered since January. Not only that, but the hacker managed to download the files for The Last of Us 1 and also Uncharted 3. And if this is truly from an employee inside Naughty Dog, they would almost always be found sooner or later. But considering that this is still an ongoing investigation, some of you might not dismiss the disgruntled employee narrative that soon. Personally, I couldn't believe that a hacker managed to exploit a vulnerability so bad that confidential game files are accessible to the hacker and that they're capable of spoiling crucial plot details of the game, which is why I went to the disgruntled employee story. I find that story to be more likely, especially during the amount of heat that Naughty Dog gets thanks to their crunch hoopla. But let's entertain this idea anyway, because all the official accounts seems to believe it. Is it possible for a couple of lone hackers to hack into the inner systems of Naughty Dog and access crucial information regarding their most anticipated game? Actually, yes, it is possible. I just do not accept the fact that a studio as big as Naughty Dog, with the backing of a company as big as Sony, has a security vulnerability that is dangerous enough to be cracked by some hackers, or at least to the same level of information that they managed to acquire. But then again, the same thing can be said to any other big corporations like social media in general, or Tokopedia. Anyway, I want to remind people that the hackers managed to acquire the early builds of the game, which allows them to make game footages that can be uploaded to YouTube. We're talking about legitimate game footages too, because otherwise Naughty Dog and Sony wouldn't have given DMCA strikes to people left and right. While I am fortunate enough to not be caught by this legal wrath, I do feel bad for my fellow internet commentators for being hit, especially those who are merely making memes out of this entire mess. Some of them got hit by this too. There is a reason why a lot of people such as myself buy into the narrative that this is from a disgruntled former employee. We simply do not see this story quite often from any major video game releases. I am aware that video games got leaked all the time. I am aware that hackers are able to exploit certain vulnerabilities that would give them access to many sorts of positions, one that would give them enough power to leak all sorts of content. That's not the issue here. The issue here is that we haven't had a leak like this in a while. We haven't had a leak that went so far as to spoil major plot points of the game. Leaks that show all the gameplay footage of all of those plot points to everyone on the internet, or even push a game that got delayed indefinitely into a much earlier release. Basically, what I'm saying is, this is one of the most significant leaks to have ever happened in the gaming industry in a while. This is nothing compared to the many game leaks that we've heard many times before. This leak is so big and so significant to the game game's launch and so impactful to the game's overall content that I find it unlikely that it's from a third-party hacker, because I assume that Naughty Dog and Sony would have had a good enough security to protect such crucial information. But it appears that I have given Naughty Dog's security team way too much credit. It is naive of me to assume that they have done a great job on this end. I assume that they are too preoccupied with whipping their employees into action. Now I want you to understand my perspective and see this event in the way that I see it. If Naughty Dog or Sony want to say that it's not someone from the inside, fine, but at least allow me to demonstrate how I can get into the perspective that it's not a hacker, aside from giving your security team way too much credit. So let's talk about the many other instances where games are being leaked. Maybe what happened with The Last of Us Part 2 happened a lot more times than we thought. So I did my research, and what I found is not very surprising, but still insightful nonetheless. As I said before, video game leaks happen all the time. Some people manage to notice certain aspects or external things from specific video games a lot earlier before the game's actual release. For example, people noticed that Crysis Remastered is a thing way earlier before the game got officially announced, because someone decided to visit the Crysis website and found out that some parts of the website pretty much tells everyone that the remastered version is gonna be out. That's a little bit of an oopsie on Crytek's part, but at least they announced the game proper a couple of days later. Oh, and speaking of Crysis, there was also an instance where Crysis 2 got leaked. It got leaked in torrent sites where you can pretty much play the game's campaign from start to finish, and there's even multiplayer support. It's buggy, but it's definitely playable. The game got leaked about 49 days before the game is actually released. The fact that the game is playable from start to finish, and the fact that we still don't know who did this, is still quite interesting. And this is not the first time that a game with a 2 on the end about a dude in a power armor fighting aliens got leaked, but we'll get to that in a bit. Through the use of data mining, some people are able to find out the future playable servants of Fate Grand Order. Some data mining or even browsing through the game's files could lead into people finding out about future events or future DLC content. A lot of leaks can happen by mistake. Developers could release the game a couple of days or weeks or even months before the game's actual release. Some game files could be mistakenly published online. Rating boards could rate the game and announce it to the world before the game is actually announced. There was one instance with Overwatch for the Switch where the Overwatch Team Nintendo Switch case got leaked, which in turn reveals that Overwatch for the Switch got leaked. Okay, it seems that we're going back and forth between leaked info and leaked games. I want you people to notice the difference on the kind of leaks that we're talking about here. Information leaks happen all the time, but since they're merely information such as texts or memos or pictures, they can be fabricated. While there are a lot of instances of leaked information, there really aren't a lot of instances of leaked games, or at least to the point where it's partially or even fully playable. As I said before, game developers could release video game copies by mistake. Some developers release the game or some DLC content a lot earlier than intended by mistake. Funnily enough, some of them are not because of hackers or data miners. It's actually because some of the game's early copies got stolen. Kingdom Hearts 3 got leaked back in December 2018 thanks to someone stealing a small portion of the game's copy and selling them through Facebook Marketplace. Fortunately, the ending of the game and the secret video of the game didn't get the same treatment. But perhaps the biggest instance of a game being leaked, or at least the biggest in terms of its story, was none other than Half-Life 2, the other game with a 2 on the end about a dude in power armor fighting aliens. Half-Life 2 got leaked thanks to hackers gaining access to a lot of things about the game prior to the game's release. It's to the point where Valve has to delay the game for another 13 months. They managed to access the source code of the game and enough files like maps, textures, sound files, models, etc. to make the game somewhat playable. The leaker managed to leak 2 versions of the game, the Anon Half-Life 2 leak and the Russian leak, both of which are slightly different from the other. The game is obviously very incomplete and quite unstable, with some maps even failing to load, but a leak is still a leak. How did the hacker get the game? Well, the story is actually quite a ride to follow. Gabe Newell noted that during the 11th of September 2002, he found suspicious activities such as someone accessing his emails, his PC acting weird by right-clicking certain exe files, crashing the Windows Explorer, and around 19th of September 2002, someone made a copy of the Half-Life 2 source tree, and that's where he found out that the hacker managed to install a keylogger on several machines in Valve, all because of a breach in Microsoft Outlook. It's not just Microsoft Outlook. A senior security researcher said that the Half-Life 2 source code theft happened because of the unpatched vulnerabilities of freaking Internet Explorer. So who is the person responsible for the Half-Life 2 leak? Well, the FBI identified several suspects that are involved in the source code leak, but Valve claimed that it was leaked by a German black hat hacker named Axel Gembe, aka Ago. The guy got tricked by Gabe into thinking that he wants to hire him, only to have the FBI prepared in the US to arrest him. Or at least that was the initial plan. He was actually arrested in Germany after the government were notified of his activities. He himself is also responsible for the creation of a Trojan called Agobot that is used to harvest user data. He was sentenced to 2 years probation, and the judge took into account that he had a difficult childhood and the fact that he was taking steps to improve his situation. So as you can see from the many examples I gave to you, video game leaks do happen, and they happen all the time. Information leaks are the most common. You can find information through data mining, browsing through the game's files, checking out ESRB once in a while and see if they accidentally announce the game's rating too early, or the developers making an oopsie. However, partial or even full video game release leaks are incredibly uncommon. They're so uncommon that the only way that those leaks could happen is if it's by developers' mistake, like them releasing the game too early, or some of the game's copies got stolen from the distributors, or a vulnerability in the developer's own network. My approach to this situation is definitely fueled by and accentuated with the fact that Naughty Dog did their employees really bad. So I find it not so surprising that some of them are willing to retaliate. I approach it in a manner that suggests that the leaker is from a disgruntled employee, and that's because I simply find the idea of someone hacking through Naughty Dog and stealing a lot of the game's files to be highly unlikely, simply because of the rarity of partial or full game leaks, some of which happens thanks to developers' mishaps. But that's not how I should have approached it. If Half-Life 2 and Crysis 2 can get leaked by hackers, then The Last of Us 2 can also get leaked by hackers, and no amount of rumored disgruntled employee story can change that certainty. So here's a question that I want to ask you. Do you still believe in a disgruntled employee narrative? Or would you like to consider the possibility that it was a hacker who did all of it? Or maybe you want to go to the extra mile and say that both are to blame. I mean, it's definitely possible that it's not just one party who is to blame. Whatever conspiracy theories that you're making out of this hoopla, at least we can enjoy The Last of Us Part 2 when the full game is finally out on YouTube.